Okay, so tonight, Be'ezras Hashem, we're going to be continuing with our series of teachings on the teachings of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. This week, we're going to be discussing the 24th Torah in the first volume of Likutei Moharan. The Torah is technically referred to as Emtsiusa D'Alma, the middle of the world, the center of the world, the center point that holds everything together. But before we go into the Torah itself, another Torah that fills all worlds and surrounds all worlds, and that if only for the hour or a little bit less that we have to try and make a slight entry into this Torah, into Torah Chaf Dalet, Emtsiusa D'Alma. But Rabbi Nachman, amongst the many gifts that he has offered us, has also offered on particular Torahs very specific biographical details as to how this Torah came into the world. Rabbi Nachman writes in the beginning of Chayei Moharan, not in the beginning of talking about his Torah, in the Chelek of Gadluso v'Noraso Shel Toraso, speaks about if a person were Zoichet to know the Nigun and the Rikud of a Torah, if a person had the Slis to understand the Nigun associated with the Torah and the dance associated with the Torah, so then a person would be able to be Machayim Meisim Mamish. And the Mefarshim of Breslov don't speak about a Tchias HaMeisim that is part of the eschatological advent of the Messianic age, but rather Tchias HaMeisim B'zeh HaOlam. My Rebbe Rav Moshe Weinberger lost his father, Zecher Tzadik Lebracha, this week. And he said in his hesped, a very powerful hesped, that there's two bechinos in Tchias HaMeisim. There's the Tchias HaMeisim that stands to be revealed in the future, when Kol HaNeshama Tekalelka, that every neshama, every individual who came into this world will have the ability to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu again. And then there's the Tchias HaMeisim that arrives in this world itself. The Tchias HaMeisim when a person moves from Katnus into Gadlus, from constricted mindset into an expansive mindset, from limitation into expansivity, from darkness into light, from Yeush into hope. That is in and of itself a bechina, a tam of Tchias HaMeisim. Mechayim Meisim Ata Rav Lo Shia. We say every day that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mechayim Meisim now. We taught in the Shirim on the Leshem Shua V'Chaloma, and following the footsteps of his Rebbe Rav Kook, rather flip it around, Rav Kook spoke in the Lashon of his Rebbe, the Leshem, that Tchias HaMeisim is not simply a Yeyud, some future destination that takes place at the end of time, but it's something that is taking place perpetually at every single moment. When a person moves out of hopelessness into hope, out of darkness into light, there's a b'china of Tchias HaMeisim. So when Rabbi Nachman says, if we can truly understand the context of a Torah, if we could understand where the Torah comes from, each and every individual teaching in the Likutei Moharan, a person can taste the tam of Tchias HaMeisim. And one of the elements that Rabbi Nachman has offered us in this regard is to give us a little bit of the historical background behind certain Torahs. Now, sometimes it's clear what the connection is between the historical events. We saw this in Torah Hey. We didn't see it so much by Torah Yud Tes. By Torah Yud Tes, we connected it to Shavuos. But in Torah Chaf Dalet, there's a unique expression of the biographical context that shapes the Torah. And it's my humble opinion that not only does the context, the historical context of this Torah, give birth to a deeper understanding, but I think that one of the statements that Rabbi Nachman records in the name of Rabbi Nachman regarding this Torah, regarding the giving over of Torah Chaf Dalet, that touches the heart of what the Torah is coming to teach. Again, based on the Klalim, the 18 principles of Rav Avram ben Rav Nachman as to how to approach the Sefer Likutei Moharan, each and every Torah is a self-enclosed environment, to the extent that even the derech in which it was given over contains the same secrets of the teaching itself, so that the process and the goal both reflect one another. Or in the spirit of Tu B'Shvat, which we're moving away from yet still holding on to, that there's a promise that Lasad Lavo, the bark of the tree, will return back to its primordial state where it maintained the taste of the fruit. And as Rav Kook said, as the Radziner Tzadikim say, and as Rabbi Nachman writes, Beferish and Likutei Halachos as well, that the bark of the tree represents the process, a way in which something is given over. The fruit of the tree represents the content giving over. The ideal state of things is when the bark itself tastes like the fruit, when a person can already taste in the process the light of the goal. And I find that this is applicable to this Torah in particular. In Chaim Maharan Osvav, so Rabbi Nosson is recording the derech in which the 17th Torah, the 16th Torah of Likutei Moharan was given over, Rabbi Yochanan Mishtai. And he writes that this Torah was given over in the year 1802. And it was said on Shacharis by Shabbos, in the middle of the summer of Tavkuf Tzadi Gimel, in 1802. I'm sorry, Tavkuf Samach Gimel, 1802. And Rabbi Nosson writes as follows. He says, "Va'aznit kabsu elav pitom al oso Shabbos." Rabbi Nachman had very specific times, 5 times a year, where the Hasidim were meant to come and visit, where it was expected that they would be visiting. And Rabbi Nosson describes here that in the middle of the summer, the Hasidim surprised Rabbi Nachman. Pitom, suddenly, appearing onto the scene without preparation. Kilo haya az zman kibbutz klal. Because at that point, it was not a time that Rabbi Nachman really wanted to see his Hasidim. As it's expressed elsewhere, that the essential times that the Kehillah would gather were based on 6 times a year that Rabbi Nachman had decided. And in the beginning, when the Hasidim surprised Rabbi Nachman, he was upset a little bit. He was holding them accountable for surprising him, for shifting the order. So when we're dealing with the Tzadikei Adoros, when we're talking about Rabbi Nachman, the times that he decided are essential. They're not happenstance. They're not accidental. When Rabbi Nachman said, you're making Shabbosim for yourself, you're not really following the path of what it means to have a tzaddik. Because Rabbi Nachman himself has decided which Shabbosim we should come. And now we've come and made for ourselves a Shabbos to gather together, surprisingly. And afterwards, Rabbi Nachman says as follows. Rabbi Nosson writes in the name of Rabbi Nachman, I wanted the Shabbos to spend time being mamtik dinim. I wanted to rectify the gezeros that were taking place for Klal Yisrael. I wanted to fix certain inyanim that were broken. I wanted to bring comfort in a place of pain. That he wanted to deal with particular dinim, particular guros, particular harsh realities that were descending into the world. Each and every individual understands what gezeros are, and the klal understands what gezeros are. And Rabbi Nachman says that I wanted to spend the Shabbos really being mavatal these dinim. Ach shani ba'atzmi ma'ani. Rabbi Nachman continues, and at this point it becomes hopeful. He says, but when I'm on my own, when my words are alone without people to listen to them, what good can I do? Ki ani ba'atzmi ish pashut. Because I, on my own, I'm a simple individual. I'm a simple person. It's very important to understand this concept when it comes to Rabbi Nachman, who's so famous for his hisparus, for the self-aggrandizement kavyachol, the praise that he offered to himself. Anybody who wants to understand the secret of the praise that Rabbi Nachman praised himself with, which sometimes rubs individuals the wrong way. Say, how can you have a tzaddik who speaks so highly of themselves? This was one of the questions that I asked Rav Kramer, I asked Gedolei HaMashpiyim, before I even knew who Rabbi Nachman was. One of the problems that many people experience when they're entering into the world of Rabbi Nachman is when they encounter statements like, Ani nahar ha-mitaher mikol haktamim. I am a river that purifies from all stains. Or chidush kamoni lo haya me'olam. Or a novelty like me has not taken place in the history of the world. Or ani ish pella. I'm a wondrous individual. A person sees this and they say, how could it be? How could a tzaddik speak this way? When a person looks at the last word, at the last teaching in the 2nd volume of Likutei Moharan, when Rabbi Nachman discusses the godless of saying Tehillim, he explains over there exactly what we need to understand. Rabbi Nachman was not only talking about himself. Rabbi Nachman was teaching each and every one of us that it's okay to feel good about ourselves. It's okay to speak strongly about ourselves. That when Rabbi Nachman says, Chidush kamoni lo haya me'olam, he means that each and every one of us also, on a small bechina, have to say, Chidush kamoni lo haya ba'olam. As Rav Kluger points out so often, that there's never been a novelty like me. Not Rabbi Nachman, me. Each and every one of us in our own individualized way, like we saw in Torah, that each and every person has to say, Kol ha'olam lo nivra ele b'shvili. And if the world is created for me, tzarich ani lehistakel ulayin b'chisaron ha'olam. I need to pay attention to the lack in the world, the destruction in the world. Ulitpalel ba'avuram, ulitakan. To daven for them and to elevate them. Only a person who believes in the power of each and every individual can speak so powerfully about himself. But alone, Rabbi Nachman says, Ani ish pashut. I'm a simple man. And that's only al pi pashtus. Rabbi Nachman was not a simple person, obviously. Kamuvan. Al kein nitkabsu ha'olam pitom. Therefore, Rabbi Nachman says, I couldn't do this alone, so therefore, suddenly you guys have descended upon me so that I can teach this Torah. So that I can perform what I must perform. And that night, Belel Shabbos, Amar Torah, Emsiusad al Mahecha. That Friday night that he was surprised by his Hasidim, he taught the teaching of where is the center of the world. Where he discusses the 9 chambers, the 9 hechalos that are not known, that are not touched, that cannot be perceived, which we're going to discuss. Then when you look in Chayim Maharan and Os Yud Ches, in the 18th Nakuda in Chayim Maharan, Rabbi Nassan lets us in on an even deeper secret with regards to this Torah of Torah Chaf Daled. Rabbi Nassan writes as follows: Maimer Emsiusa de Alma, the teaching, the center of the world. Siman Chaf Daled. Ne'emar Bekayetz Taf Kuf Samech Gimel 1802 Besudas Leil Shabbos. The Amar also B'yira Gedola. And Rabbi Nachman taught this teaching with an intense awe, an intense fear. B'hislahavus atzum v'nishkav kol kach. With a deep intensity, to such an extent, ad shelo yachlu hashomim lahavin klal mahu omer. To the point that the Hasidim who came and surprised Rabbi Nachman, like we saw in Osvav, they couldn't understand what their Rebbe was saying. They heard the words, they saw him speaking, they saw the face of the tzaddik, like we saw in Torah Yud Tes, but they couldn't understand it all. Rak nichtav acher kach bechsivas yado u'b'lashono hakdosha. Afterwards, Rabbi Nachman did us the great chesed of writing it down for us. And that's how we have this Torah. And what's surprising is that for a Torah that cannot be understood, Rabbi Nassan makes a big asek out of this Torah. Rabbi Nassan stresses in Likutei Halachos, Hilchos Birchos Hodaya, what we're going to be basing a lot of our Torah on. Before even beginning to discuss this Torah, he states that it is imperative upon each and every one of us to understand that no matter how lofty the ideals expressed in this Torah are, no matter how profoundly Kabbalistic they are in their source, nevertheless, each and every Jew, each and every person with a Jewish heartbeat in their bodies needs to believe deeply, ad mesiras nefesh, that this Torah applies to them in and where they exist at that moment. That yes, this is a lofty Torah, a Torah that was so high that nobody understood what the tzaddik was saying. Nevertheless, this is a Torah that must be understood on an existential level in each and every individual's situatedness in their life. And with that, we're going to begin trying to understand my humble opinion, my humble reading, my humble understanding of what Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, Rabbi Nachman ben Fega, is coming to teach us in the 24th teaching of Likutei Maharan. That teaching that was given over on that strange night in 1802 in the middle of the summer, when the Hasidim happened upon their Rebbe, when they surprised him, where they threw him into a state of chaos, where they forced him to express what was in his heart at that moment, b'li hachana, which in turn was also an attempt of Rabbi Nachman to fix the judgments in the world, to rectify the brokenness in the world. Rabbi Nachman begins this Torah with the Gemara in Bechayres Daf Ches Amud Beis, one of the discussions of Sabbath Beyasuna, the Tanaim and their confrontations with the Greek philosophers of the time. And the way the Gemara describes these discussions are that the Greeks were attempting to disparage or disprove certain truths or certain concepts or certain motifs within the Torah. And Chazal, in their infinite wisdom, garbed these ideas in riddles and in Agadata that contain the secrets of secrets, as the Vilna Gaon points out. The chelik of Torah that's hidden in the belly of the snake, the chelik of Torah that has the most galus chal on it, that exists in the depths of the belly of the snake, that vav of gichon, the middle letter of the Torah, which Chazal tell us are the large vav of gichon, of all those animals that slither on their stomachs, implying the profoundly paradoxical concept that when a person comes to the center of the Torah, where they find themselves is in the belly of the snake. Like the Rashash says in his Perush in Nahar Shalom, on the bracha of Malbish Arumim, Ravitchemeyer Morgenstern Shlita. Ravitchemeyer Morgenstern Shlita teaches us over and over again that this concept the Rashash brings down, that Olam Haza is found in the beten of the Nachash. That this world that we exist in, based on the Hishtalshelos HaOlamos, we can perceive it as existing within the belly of the primordial serpent. Which makes a lot of sense when you think about what's going on in the world in 2020 and what was going on in the world in 1802 as well by Rebbe Nachman. And these Gemaras are discussing the conversations through Agadata between the rabbinic mind and between the Greek mind. And the Greeks approach the Tanaim and they say, Amrulei, Emsiusa de Almahecha, where is the center of the world? Where is the center of the world? Where is that nukuda? Where is that point that holds everything together? Where can a person find the promise that the world has a center that anchors it? The essence that we spoke about in Torah Yud Tes. Where is it? Zakvala etzbasa. The Tana points his finger upwards. Amru lahu, and he responds to them, Hacha. It's right here. As the Zohar says, Ilu lo ba'ati ela lazed dai. Had I not come to teach this, it would have been enough. Where is the center of the world? Here, wherever I am. Wherever I am in this moment, that is where the center of the world is. Hacha, it's here. The Tana points and he says, it's right here. Amrulei, they said to him, Mi Amar, who will come and prove this? Amar, the Tana responds, Aisla ashlu mochla. Moshcha, bring a measuring stick and measure it. This Agadata, this Gemara, is what Rabbi Nachman is going to base his teaching on. Now, Rabbi Nachman begins by stating outright, Da sheish or shehu lamala min afshin v'ruchim v'neshmasin v'hu or ein soif, that you should know that there is an infinite light that is loftier than our human capacity to grasp. Something that should be abundantly clear by now for anyone who listened to the Shirim on the Leshem, on Rav Kook, on Rav Yitzchak Morgenstern Shlita, on Ishbitz and Radzin, even on addiction. That there's a light, there's a presence in the world, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinite presence, the light of the infinite, the expression that HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed in order to create the world, that is above our capacity to grasp. It is above the three gradations of the spirit, the mind, the body, and the soul, the nefesh, the ruach, and the neshama. Meaning to say that it is not something that we can grasp. It is not something that we can ever claim that we have in our hands. But rather it is always something that we're yearning towards, always something that we're forced to believe in as opposed to know. Because knowledge implies a certain seizure. Knowledge implies a certain grasp of something. What Rabbi Nachman is setting us up for right here is stating that you should know. Da. Tzaddikim say that Rabbi Nachman teaches the Torah of Da, something that happens very often in Lukit Maran. It's a Torah that comes from a place of Atik. It's a Torah that comes from the highest level. But I think that there's another way to understand this as well, and it's not a contradiction. When Rabbi Nachman says Da, you should know, he begins the Torah with you should know. He's stating that you might never find an external proof to this Torah. You may never find any rational reason to believe in a Torah like this. But understand that intuitively, when you strip away the layers of excess that cover over the soul, you will come to find that you know this idea intuitively as well as you know your own heart. That means that while you might not find external support for this idea in your life, you may not find external reasons to trust in such an idea, Nevertheless, you should know from the depths of your being that this is true. And that your inner certitude that these teachings are true is enough to provide the individual with comfort. And Rebbe Nachman says, you should know that there's a light that is above our capacity to ever grasp. And then Rebbe Nachman comes along and he says something incredible. Something incredible. He says as follows, and this is not unique for the tzaddikim, but it's unique to find it expressed in such a poignant way. And furthermore, as we're going to see, it's unique to apply this to the lived experience of each and every individual as they find themselves in the mud. People speak about these ideas in the world of Atzilus, but very few tzaddikim talk about the ability to attach themselves to these ideas when they find themselves rolling around in the muck and the mud of Olam HaAsiyah, in the lowest imaginable place. That's what Rabbi Nachman comes to do. Rabbi Nachman says that even though this light is loftier than our capacity to ever truly understand, Afal Pikain, that phrase that we've spoken about already, Afal Pikain, nevertheless, Redifa de Machshava Lemirdaf Abasre. It's the nature of the mind to chase after it, to run after it, to be roidef after it, to run after it with all of its essence, with all of its life. The al yedeya haredifa, and by running after this light, this grasp, this idea that you can never grasp because it's above you, az haseichel masigoso, then the mind comes to grasp it. A paradox. It's a light that can't be grasped, but if you run after it strong enough, you'll be able to grasp it. So how do you settle the paradox? On the one hand, it's an ungraspable light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. On the other hand, if you chase strongly enough against it or after it, you might be zoicha to feel it. So Rebbe Nachman says, you will be zoicha to it bebechinas mati v'loy mati. You will touch it and not touch it. Now, bechinas mati v'lo mati is a lashon from the Zohar, which has then become a fundamental law in the ontology of existence through the writings of the Arizal and his student Rav Chaim Vital. Then in Eitz Chaim Kadisha, there's Shar Mati V'Loi Mati, describing the secrets of reality. In Eitz Chaim, in Shar HaEkudim, the Arizal describes at length the nature of this type of relationship, which is touching and not touching. But when a person looks at it in the words of the Arizal, it's implied as two different stages. That a person can chase after a certain form of light, and there will be moments of mati, there will be moments of reaching it, of touching it, and then there will be moments of lo mati, of not touching it. Almost as if to say, I touch it and then I don't touch it. I have it and then I don't have it. I grasp it and then I don't grasp it. As if they can't exist simultaneously. If you grasp it, then there's no concept of being unable to grasp it. And if you're unable to grasp it, there's no concept of grasping it. And it becomes a monolithic, very neat description of what spirituality is. There are times where you can grasp HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and there are times where you cannot. But what Rabbi Nachman is saying here, as made clear by Rabbi Nassan, as made clear, as I've heard from numerous people, by the living tzaddikim, in the name of Rav Koenig, in the name of Rav Kluger, in the name of Rav Morgenstern, Kuli Alma Lo Fligi, that when Rabbi Nachman says that you can grasp this light, bebechinas mati v'lo mati, touching and not touching, grasping and not grasping, it's describing a simultaneous moment. That when it comes to grasping the ungraspable light, when it comes to touching a level of certainty that is far beyond what our kalim or our vessels are capable of grasping, it's not a question of grasping it or not grasping it, but rather it's a reality of grasping it and not grasping it at once. That a person comes to recognize that it's only in the moment that I recognize that I cannot grasp the infinitude of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the moment that I retreat into myself and I surrender, as Rav Soloveitchik would say so often, to the fact that I cannot grasp the infinity in its infinitude, at that moment I contact the infinite by way of my infinite resignation. By not touching it, I touch it. By acknowledging the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is always lamala from my holiness, that kedushasi lamala me kedushaseichem, that no matter how high an individual ascends on the rungs of spirituality, nevertheless, there will be an infinite and infinitesimal gap separating created reality and the infinite creator. It is at the moment that I mind the gap that separates God and reality that I allow for there to be a traversing of that gap, a small, very narrow bridge, a gesher tsar ma'od ma'od, that allows me to cross over that impenetrable and unbridgeable space to touch that which I can never truly touch. And therefore, by way of recognizing that I can never truly grasp HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvodo uva'atzmo chas v'shalom, I come to realize that I have a direct contact with HaKadosh Baruch Hu through emunah, through a strength that is beyond rational logic. So Rebbe Nachman says that there is a light that is above the soul, and that the soul can never truly grasp this light. When the mind runs after that light that it can't grasp, we're zochet to grasp it by way of mati velo mati. We touch it when we're not touching it. When we acknowledge our limited existence as human beings, with all of the symptoms that are carried with that, the fear, the anxiety, the discomfort, the excitement, the longing, the yearning, the desire, the unsatisfaction, the dissatisfaction, the hope, all of the different factors that comprise the delicate picture of what it means to be a human being, they all exist within that void, that gap that separates the infinite and the finite. And the only way to bridge that gap is by chasing, even though we know we will never arrive. Because when we acknowledge that we can never truly arrive, that in and of itself is a taste of the arrival. And so Rebbe Nachman says that the only way to grasp these lofty levels, this or that is above the nefesh, the ruach, and the neshama, beyond our conscious awareness, it's only by chasing in spite of the fact that we know we will never reach the end. When we allow ourselves to settle into the journey with the deep knowledge that we will never trace the true destination. At that point, the destination disseminates itself, it breaks open into a million pieces and forces itself into every step of the journey. So that every step of the journey, which feels like an impossibility, is suffused and infused with the light of the destination. But it's only by way of holding in mind that gap, that mati velo mati bevas achas, that noga ve'eno noga, that touching and not touching at the same time, that paradoxical space of emunah that exceeds the capacity of human knowledge to grasp anything. And then Rebbe Nachman continues, and Kedarcha B'Kodesh, he says, but how do you find this? How does a person experience this bechina of mati velo mati? How can a person settle into this paradoxical space wherein I'm touching and not touching at the same time? When I mind the fact that I can never truly reach the essence or the infinite, it's specifically there that I behold the infinite within my human condition. How is the person zeichet to such a thing? Through simcha, through joy. Not only simcha, but the joy in mitzvos, which we described in Torah. That ability to say zeh, here in this moment, I am engaged in the essential act of my existence, to find presence in what I do. A person wants to know how to taste mati v'lo mati, how to draw that infinite and ungraspable light into their grasp and into the finitude of existence. It's only through simcha. It's only when a person is capable of looking at their moment, of looking where they are in life at that moment and saying, I am here now. Ani kan achshav. I am here now at this moment. In this moment. And Rebbe Nachman continues and he says, where does this simcha come from? And here Rebbe Nachman is going to introduce us to something remarkable. Now, we gave an entire shir on this concept of Reisha de Loisyada, the unknowable head, or the head that cannot be grasped, the loftiest level in the Shita of the Arizal, that place above all of our human understanding, which leaves us wondering, which forces us into the recesses of hope, when we abandoned all knowledge, when we abandon the capacity of human rationality to grasp anything or anything. It's at that moment that we embrace the deepest level of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu has revealed within this world, something referred to as Reisha Lo Isyada, the unknowable head, or the head that can never be truly known. Because anytime a person feels that they've grasped it, they're forced once again to recognize that they haven't quite grasped it yet. It is the ceiling that becomes the floor for the level above it. And in order to introduce fully what Rabbi Nachman is going to say, we're going to make a slight deviation, a slight interruption into the teachings of the Arizal. Now, when it comes to the Torah of the Yechidei Hadoros, as Rav Yitzchak Morgenstern has pointed out, Moshe Rabbeinu, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, the Arizal, the Baal Shem Tov, and Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, sometimes it's very necessary to understand the Torah of the previous tzaddik in order to understand the Torah of the next tzaddik. But even more than that, sometimes the interruption is part of the process. Sometimes we need to deviate from the proclaimed course of focusing on the Torah of Rabbi Nachman in order to understand, as is so explicit in the writings of Chaim Maharan and everywhere else, that Rabbi Nachman's Torah is not simply yesh min ha'ayin, something from nothing, but it's a Torah that is predicated on the history of Kabbalah that preceded it. Not only the writings of the Arizal, but the writings of the Ramah, and the writings of Rashbi and the Zohar HaKadosh, and the writings of Chazal. As Rabbi Nachman points out and shows throughout all of his Torahs, the complete command of what he's trying to show. The Arizal writes in Eitz Chaim, Shar Yud Gimel Perek Beis, in the 13th Shar Yud Gimel Perek Vav, the 13th Shar, the 6th chapter, that originally when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, he wanted to create it with 10 spheros, as we know. But when we look at the Zohar and Parshas Nayach, we only see 9 spheros. We see the spheros of Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvura, Teferes, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. Without Keser, and without Malchus. So the question, Rabbi Nachman, the question the Arizal is coming to ask is, where is this Malchus? The lowest expression of reality, where is it at the origin of the creation of the world? Where do we find Malchus? Where do we find that impoverishment, that destitution in which human beings exist? Where is that to be found? We don't see it explicitly expressed. And the Arizal, based on the Zohar in Parshas Noach and in Parshas Bo, points out that Malchus, the lowest sphera, the lowest field, the lowest expression of reality, is rooted in the sphera, in the parts of Reishad Lo Isyada, the unknowable head. But because that unknowable head, that can never truly be known because of its lofty nature that exceeds human capacity of knowledge, because it can never be known, it doesn't express itself at the beginning. And this unknowability, this fissure, this lack, this moment of concealment that exists at the loftiest point in which the infinite touches the finite, which the human mind can never grasp other than by way of mati velo mati, of touching and not touching at once, it eventually expresses itself and manifests itself in Malchus, in our worldly reality, to the point that the doubts that pervade this worldly experience, the anxieties that assault each and every individual, that tell them that what you're worried about might be true, that push us away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that push us away from tefillah, that forces us to daven in a world of safek. Those sveikos are not simply problems of existential reality, but rather they are doubts that emerge from the loftiest place referred to as the sveikos of Reishad Lo Isyada, the doubts associated with the unknowable head, which will always remain doubtful by dint of the fact that it is always already beyond the grasp of human consciousness. So Rabbi Nachman, based on the writings of the Arizal, is working off of the idea that if we want to understand where the source is for our experience in this world, the experience that is cut through with doubt and anxiety and yigia and difficulty and all of the different things that go bump in the night, It's rooted in the loftiest place. It's rooted in Reisha Lois Yada. It's rooted in the unknowability and that doubt that emerges out of the fact that we can never truly grasp it. That mati velo mati bevasachas. That our only access to this infinite realm is by way of touching and not touching at once, which as a symptom manifests down in our experience as being doubtful as to how things go. So when Rabbi Nachman says, you want to understand how to be zocha, to grasp this light that is above you, this presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that exceeds human consciousness, it's only through simcha. It's only through finding joy in this world. It's only through accepting your circumstances in this world. It's only in serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu with where you are at that present moment in this world. And here Rabbi Nachman takes us on a journey. He says, you want to know where Malchus is to be found? Because again, we said Malchus is rooted in that lofty place. And now Rabbi Nachman is going to take us from the bottom all the way up to the top. Like an elevator that goes from the bottom of the basement all the way to the penthouse, showing us that you cannot find access to the penthouse unless you enter into the elevator on the bottom floor, lower than the bottom. He says, you want to know how to find simcha? You want to know how to find the simcha necessary to engage this space of mati velo mati? It's only through being mala, the chayus and the kedusha within the klipos themselves, in the aspect of the 11 spices of the ketores, which are the excess of this world. Ketorah, suffice it to say, is the secret of the sparks of holiness that enliven impurity. The deepest secrets of the Arizal, of the Zohar, of the Torah HaKadosha. Ketorah is the question of how to find life in death. How to find light in the depths of darkness. After the Magefa of the catastrophe and the deaths of thousands and thousands of Jewish people, after the assault of Korach and the machlokas of Korach, Moshe Rabbeinu draws down the secret of Ketorah. And Chazal tell us that where does Moshe Rabbeinu learn the secret of Ketorah from? He found it from the Malach HaMaves. That when Moshe Rabbeinu was Alisa Lamaram V'Shavisa Shevi, ascended on high in order to capture gifts, Chazal tell us that he forced the Malach HaMaves, he forced death itself to offer him its gift, to teach him the secret of how death can also be part and parcel of the expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How can darkness be a vehicle for light? How can bad be a vehicle for good? And that's the secret of the Ketorah. When a person looks at the kavanos of the Ketorah in Shara Kavanos or Priyetz Chaim or in Olos Raya, a person understands. When a person looks in the halachos of Nefilas Apayim that Rabbi Nosson writes in the Likutei Halachos, a person understands what Rabbi Nachman is saying here. That the secret of the Ketorah is how a person finds themselves b'jiota tachtoina, lower than low, lower than they ever imagined themselves finding themselves, stuck in the bottom. And lev yadei maras nafsho, each and every person knows what the bottom means for themselves. It's only when we're able to draw out the joy and the chayus and the vitality and the intensity and the spirituality that saturates even those lowest places that a person begins to have a sense of what simcha is. Because when a person elevates themselves, when a person forces themselves wherever they are, in the moment that they find themselves, to draw the chayus and the vitality and the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that is found even in the lowest place, we elevate it with simcha, we draw out that light. And then Rabbi Nachman says, what do you do with this light? You bring it into the bechina, into the aspect of netzach, hod, and yesod, the lower parts of our body, the lower parts of our experience, the legs of our experience, those things which are habituated and natural, and the mundane and banal sense of being alive. That once a person has affirmed the joy that can be found in the joyless places, once a person has confirmed and promised themselves to believe in light even in the dark places, that light ascends, it begins to elevate itself back to its source in Reishad Lois Yada, back to that unknowable place, back to that place where only Amunah abides, where knowledge is obliterated because it's shattered at its limit, where only a super-rational faith exists. We begin to take that feeling of joy, of being present in the moment where I am at, and I allow it to enliven my legs. I allow it to let me move a little bit more, to dance in a dark world, or to dance on the abyss, as we said. To begin to continue to walk, to push myself forward, in spite of the fact that things remain dark. And then when a person takes that simcha and they allow it to enliven their legs, and the targa of netzach, hod, and yesod, those lower elements of the individual's experience, those parts of ourselves which are habituated and unconscious, when we begin to believe in our unconscious state that it proclaims spirituality as well, that's when we elevate that light of malchus, that chayos, that vitality, that energy that ascends from the depths of darkness into our hands. And the hands, says Rabbi Nachman, are the source of blessing. That arimas yadi betzlusa, like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says in Parshas Nayach in the Zohar, that this entire teaching is based on. The Zohar of Tesei Chalin, of the 9 chambers, I raise my hands in joy, which means to say that not only have I awakened myself from the deathly slumber of unconsciousness within the klipos, within my habituatedness, within my hopelessness, I have also elevated to my legs. I have also allowed my habituation to express the light of God. And not only that, not only have I allowed myself to look at my unexpressed life, my unconscious expressions, my habituatedness, my walking, not only have I said that Hashem's light is found there, but I have raised it to my hands as well. The hands are the source of blessing. The hands are the source that express that we want to move forwards, upwards, or we want to express downwards. And the light begins to ascend from the legs up to the arms. And Netzach Hod Yesod begins to engarb itself upon Chesed, Gevura, and Teferes, the body. When a person dances, Rabbi Nachman says they're raising their legs, they're raising their knees up to the middle half of their body, expressive of the fact that an individual is elevating that tzabrachenkeit, that brokenness, that anxiety, that stuckness, back up to a space of bracha, back up to a space of freedom. But that's not enough for Rabbi Nachman. Rabbi Nachman says, based on the Arizal, again, that, and when a person elevates this light that ascends, this vitality that can be found even in the darkest places, up through Netzach Hod Yesod of the legs, up to the Chagas, the Chesed, Gevura, Teferes of the arms, then we have to elevate it to the Moichin, to consciousness, where a person begins to be mindfully aware of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence in their life, where a person begins to think about God, where a person begins to contemplate God. Not only do I believe God to be found in the darkest of places, not only do I believe God to be found in my habituated unconscious state, not only do I find God in my hands and the source of blessing and work and engagement in my life, but I elevate it back up to the loftiest place in my moichin, in my chabad, in my chochma, bina, and das. And Rabbi Nachman describes this raising of the malchus out of the klipa, elevating presence of this world out of its constriction, out of its anxiety, out of its meaninglessness, elevating it into the state of unconscious, back to consciousness, all the way back to the moichin. And this process of moving from below to above is still the same process of simcha. The simcha that Rabbi Nachman tells us is necessary in order to experience the loftiest level that we can ever experience, which is mati v'lo mati b'vasachas, touching and not touching HaKadosh Baruch Hu at once, recognizing the limitation of our knowledge and our consciousness, while at the same point affirming that it is the very limitation of our human experience that gives us access to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is why the Malachim were incapable of receiving the Torah. They were too good, they were too perfect. It's only the imperfection, it's only our incapacity and our inability and our anxiety and our brokenness that gives us a taste of what the infinite can truly be. And here's where Rabbi Nachman brings us into the biggest secret of this Torah. And again, I apologize for rushing through this, but I'm trying to express the Ikar Nakuda in my humble opinion. Then Rabbi Nachman says, once a person has elevated the Malchus out of the Klipa, their sense of experience out of Tzabrachenkeit into the unconsciousness of the legs, from the unconsciousness of the legs into the activity of the hands, from the activity into the hands of the understanding of the mind, a person needs to draw down into the mind itself, Pnimius Habirchen, the inner interiority of what blessing means. And what is that inner interiority? What is that essence? That is emunah. That is the emunah, that super rational faith that even transcends consciousness. That is the bechina of keser. That if a person wants to truly understand the place of Malchus, the root of our experience, we need to move all the way up through Netzach Hod Yesod, through Chesed, Gvur, and Teferes, back up through Chachma, Bina, and Das, back to Keser. That Nekuda of Keser, that Nekuda of Emunah, that place where a person is forced to recognize the limitation of their own selves, that is the source of Malchus. Because as Rabbi Nachman describes in this Torah, and explicitly states further in Torah Vav, which we would have no time to try and teach in an hour, that the Bechina of Keser, if you want to understand the loftiest level in the Seder Ashtalshalos, what does Keser mean? It means Hamtein. Like the Gemara says, what is about Tshuva? It's like somebody who comes to the shuk and wants to buy in a farsimon, they want to buy a fruit, they want to taste something good. And the Bala Chanvani and the owner says, Hamtein, wait. You have to be patient. And Rabbi Nachman points out, based on Sefer Iyov, a Sefer that Rabbi Nachman draws so much light out of, specifically out of the darkest places, that Kasar li ze'ir, wait for me a little bit. Kasar is the Lashon of Hamtein. That when a person reaches the level of Kasar, when a person moves beyond the modes of conscious awareness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, back up to that infinite place, back up to that Reishad Lois Yada, back up to the level of Keser. It's not a grasp. There's no essential grasp of anything. There's no ability to say, I've arrived, I've reached it. By Chachma, Bina, and Das, a person can understand or know. By Chesed and Gevur and Teferes, and by the hands, a person can act. By the legs, by Netzach Hod Yesod, a person can engage and they can walk. Those are all graspable, measurable things. When it comes to the level of Keser, it's wait. Hamtein ad she'ashivena, wait until I answer you. That patience that is demanded of an individual who sits suspended in animation between the question and an answer, willing to move forward even in spite of the lack of an answer, it's that person who has access to the level of Keser. It's that person who is forced to acknowledge, as Rabbi Nachman forces us over and over and over again to understand, that tachlis hayadiyah hi shelo neda, that the apex of wisdom above and beyond the moichin is the recognition that I don't know anything, that my reasoning and my rationality fail. They pale in comparison to the infinitude of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's specifically when I reach that point of acknowledging the failure of my attempt to grasp God, that I touch HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because I'm forced into emunah. When rationality collapses upon itself, I'm forced to experience a connection beyond rationality. I'm forced to believe in something without a reason. And it's that emunah, which is the midah of Malchus, that's stuck in the dirt, that's stuck in the klipos, that's stuck in all the broken places where we find ourselves. It's specifically that midah of emunah, which is born out of concealment and doubt. As Rabbi Nachman says elsewhere, that there's no need for emunah during the day. It's only at nighttime, that emunas chabalelos, that a person needs emunah, because it's only in the space of doubts that emunah are necessary. That space of doubtful reality draws a person all the way back up to the highest place, which is Keser, which is Reishad Lo Isyada. The anxiety of not knowing what goes on at the level of Malchus is a symptom of the anxiety and the sveikos that take place at the loftiest expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which remain doubtful, which are the sveikos of Reishad Lo Isyada, the unknowable head of Reishad Lo Isyada, which can never be known because of its lofty nature. And Rabbi Nachman says that when the mind hits the keser, it's as if it's hitting a ma'akev. It's hitting that which prevents the mind from moving any further. That ma'akev itself, that prevention of moving any further, forces the mind to retreat back into itself, to retreat back into the acknowledgement that I can never truly know HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and to be suffused with faith. And then that faith gives birth to another attempt to seize hold of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And once again, it's knocked down by the ma'akev. that keser that stands preventing my mind from moving beyond itself, from entering into a place which should nullify me completely in my existence. And it's that ma'akev, it's that prevention, says Rabbi Nachman, that is mesader and miyashev the mind, that gives birth to thinking. That ma'akev, that prisa, that spread light that blocks the mind from being capable of experiencing infinitude in and of itself, is what gives birth to the creation of the space for me to actually believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this running and returning, this moving forward to try and grasp Hashem, then hitting the limit and being forced back into myself, acknowledging that I can never truly understand HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then moving forward again, this redifa, this chasing, and then being pushed back by the ma'akev, in a very architectonic sense, Rabbi Nachman describes that it creates these 9 chambers. These 9 chambers of those upper 9 spheros, which are lacking in Malchus, like we said, based on the Arizal, which are the place which become the receptacles that allow us to draw the light of Emunah into our lives. Which means to say that it is only by way of not reaching HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we create the space in which we can believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If it was possible for us to know HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there would be no room or space to believe in Hashem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to give us the gift of believing in Him, which is on an even higher level of knowing Him, and therefore He has placed a prevention in our minds, in existence, in our anxieties, which prevent us from moving beyond them, which forces us to double back down into the space of faith. Oy. Before we finish off the teaching of Rabbi Nachman, I need to read from Likutei Halachos. Likutei Halachos, Birchos Hodah, Os Vav, Halacha Vav. Rabbi Nachman expresses this entire Torah at such remarkable length and expression that it's almost difficult to believe that such a thing exists in the world of Torah. Not chas v'shalom because of the Torah, but because of what we think Torah is. If a person reads the words of Rabbi Nachman here, it's impossible not to be lit aflame. But I'm going to read a very small piece, which also highlights everything we've been saying about Daika and Afal Pikein, that it's specifically in not knowing HaKadosh Baruch Hu fully that we grasp HaKadosh Baruch Hu through faith. Rabbi Nachman writes as follows in Os Chaf Dalid, in the 24th piece, or the 24th point, in this Hilchos Hoda'ah Os Vav. Vayiketz Yaakov v'shinaso. And Yaakov awoke from his slumber. Vayomer. And he said, Achin yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh. Behold, the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is found here. Va'anochi lo yadati. And I didn't know. Rabbi Nachman says, Va'anochi lo yadati, and I didn't know. Ze bechinas taklis hayadiyah deloy noida. When Yaakov Avinu woke up and he said, I didn't know, he wasn't proclaiming a lack of knowledge, he was proclaiming a grasp of a form of knowledge which is expressed by way of negativity. Lo yadati. I have come to understand the level of lo. I have come to understand what it means to have a limit in my mind. Va'anochi lo yadati, and I didn't know, or I knew the inability to know. This is the aspect of tachlis hayadiyah deloy noda. That the apex of wisdom is coming to the place where I recognize that my wisdom fails in appreciating what I can grasp, which is the bechina of the makom, which is what it means to have a place in this world, which is the aspect of keser, which is the aspect of the mesader and the miyashev, which is the aspect of the ma'akev, as anyone who looks in Torah Chavdalid will understand. Va'al yedei zeh daika, it's specifically through the inability to know that the ikar hasaga of elokus, that is the essential grasp of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, specifically when a person comes to understand that they can't understand. Al yedei haka'as haradifa b'hama'akev, when the mind hits the limit and is forced back into itself, acknowledging its failure, acknowledging its necessary retreat, in that surrender itself is born the deep faith which animates human beings. And this is what Yaakov Avinu meant when he says, Achin yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh. Hashem is found here, va'anochi lo yadati, and I merited the level of I didn't know. Shadaika al yedei va'anochi lo yadati, specifically by way of not knowing, which is the aspect of the ma'akev, that prevention, I came to understand. Al yedei zed daika hasagti ata elokuso. Specifically, by not being able to grasp HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I've come to grasp that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is present in my life. Specifically through the Ma'akev, which is the Bechina of Meniyas HaYediyah, the prevention of knowledge, to the point that I need to settle in my mind that the only way to grasp HaKadosh Baruch Hu is through Heder HaYediyah. That specifically through recognizing the limitation of my knowledge, I come to grasp Heder HaYediyah. I move from the absence of knowledge to knowledge, which is a bechina of ha'chachme ma'ayin timsa. That chachma is born out of the nothingness of keser. To end this Torah, Rabbi Nachman returns back to the Maimer of Chazal. He says, where is the center of the world? Where is that place? Where is a person going to be zoche to grasp that presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in their lives? That centering agent to all things, that thing that settles all anxiety, the nekuda ha'emtza'is that holds everything together. Where is it to be found? Heichanhu, hacha, it's here. It's wherever a person finds themselves. It's wherever a person finds himself stuck in the klipa, stuck in ketores. But how can you get there? Mi yemar, who says? Ashli, Aisu Ashli Moishcho. Moishcho, Rabbi Nachman says, is Lashon of Simcha. You want to understand how to find the center of the universe, how to find the center of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in your life? Find joy in the fact that you don't know. Find joy in the fact that mi yemar, that you have to find yourself in the world of Tamura, that you have to find yourself in the world of doubts and concealment and transitions and flips and turns and the hipuch that flips everything. It's specifically there in the lowest point of our experience, the doubts of our experience. When a person is makabel them, they actually touch the essence of emunah, which will always remain emunah, because a person can never truly grasp the essence of yediyah except by way of lo yada. Next week, Be'ezras Hashem, we're going to continue with Torah Nun Beis, a Torah about hispoidedus, a Torah about being awake in the heart of darkness, in the middle of the night, and how to transform existential loneliness into the spirituality of solitude. Be'ezras Hashem.